The waitress gave water to a beggar, not knowing he was a secret millionaire testing her kindness. What he did next shocked her. The air in the opulent Thorne Industries boardroom was thick, heavy with the scent of expensive Cuban cigars and the palpable tension of naked ambition. Crystal chandeliers, each facet catching and refracting the light into 1,000 blinding points, illuminated the polished mahogany table and the faces gathered around it. Caleb Thorne, his tailored suit gleaming like a second skin, leaned back in his plush leather chair, a smug smirk, a habitual sneer, playing on his lips. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over the faces of the other board members, most of whom were distant relatives or longtime associates, all eager, almost salivating, for their share of the vast Thorne empire. A subtle preening could be observed in his posture, a quiet satisfaction in the way he held court. Honestly, Caleb drawled, a dismissive wave of his manicured hand accompanying his words, the gesture a clear dismissal of any descending thought. The old man has truly lost his marbles. Wandering the streets, claiming he's some kind of social experiment, it's rather pathetic, isn't it? An embarrassment to the Thorne name. A ripple of nervous, yet eager, laughter spread through the room. They had all heard the rumors, seen the fleeting, grainy photos that occasionally surfaced online, images of Magnus Thorne, the reclusive founder of Thorne Industries, looking utterly disheveled and aged beyond his years, begging for scraps in dimly lit alleys. They dismissed it, almost in unison, as the inevitable senility of a man who had accumulated too much money and, seemingly, too little sense in his final years. His mind, once a steel trap of innovation and foresight, was surely crumbling. Caleb's cousin, Lydia, a woman whose every accessory, from her diamond-encrusted watch to her alligator skin handbag, screamed designer label and extravagant taste, chimed in, her voice a brittle tinkle of condescension. Indeed, Caleb. We should just have him admitted. For his own good, of course. A nice, quiet facility. Then we can finally focus on the real business of this company. Her gaze, sharp and acquisitive, lingered on the projections of Thorne Industries' next quarter profits displayed on the large screen, her mind already calculating her own personal cut, the new villa she could buy, the lavish trips she could plan. They spoke of the company as if it were a ripe fruit, ready for the plucking. Unbeknownst to them, nestled quietly in a corner chair, a figure who had been mistakenly identified as a low-level consultant, perhaps a junior analyst, or an intern brought in to observe, listened intently. His face was clean-shaven, almost unnervingly so after weeks of neglect, his attire impeccable, a stark and deliberate contrast to the worn clothes he had donned for what felt like an eternity. Yet, a ghost of his recent past still lingered in the deep lines around his eyes, lines carved not by age alone, but by the harsh streets he had walked, by the cold winds and the constant gnawing of hunger. Magnus Thorne, the very man they were discussing with such casual disdain, allowed a faint, knowing smile to touch his lips. The irony of the situation was exquisite, almost poetic in its cruel precision. They spoke of him as if he were already gone, a ghost of his former self, a madman to be conveniently tucked away and forgotten. A profound satisfaction, cold and sharp, settled within him. Oh, I assure you, a voice, surprisingly clear and resonant despite the speaker's apparent age and quiet demeanor, cut through their self-congratulatory chatter. Every head in the room snapped towards the corner, startled, as if a long-dormant statue had suddenly spoken. The confident expressions on their faces wavered, replaced by confusion and then, slowly, dawning recognition. The old man is very much here. And the game, as you so delicately put it, is most certainly over. Caleb's smirk faltered, dissolving into a frown of utter bewilderment. He squinted, trying to place the man, his mind scrambling through the faces of junior executives and distant, insignificant relatives. There was something familiar, yet utterly out of context. "Excuse me? Do I know you?" he demanded, his tone laced with his usual, dismissive condescension, the automatic defense of someone whose authority was being questioned. "You're not authorized to speak during these family matters." The last two words were spat out, emphasizing the exclusivity of their circle. Magnus slowly rose from the corner chair, his posture straightening, shedding the guise of a humble consultant. An undeniable authority, an almost tangible power, emanated from him, filling the opulent room, pushing back against the scent of cigars and the tension of ambition. His eyes, once shadowed with careful observation, now gleamed with a quiet power that had built an empire from nothing. He looked directly at Caleb, his gaze piercing, unwavering, stripping away the younger man's feigned bravado. "Oh, you know me, Caleb. Perhaps better than you think. You've just been too busy looking down to ever truly see." The silence that followed was deafening, pregnant with an anticipation none of them yet understood. The true nature of their world, and their carefully constructed futures, was about to unravel, their carefully spun web of deceit and entitlement about to be shredded. Magnus Thorne had built Thorne Industries from nothing but a brilliant, audacious idea and an unshakable will. He was a visionary in an era of incremental improvements, a man who saw potential where others saw only obstacles, a desert where others saw only sand. He had started in a cramped, dusty garage, fueled by cheap coffee and an insatiable curiosity, developing a revolutionary data compression algorithm that would, in time, become the backbone of global digital communication. For over 5 decades, he had poured his lifeblood into the company, nurturing it from a fledgling tech startup into a global conglomerate that touched every aspect of modern life, from the algorithms that powered financial markets to the software that managed healthcare systems. He amassed a fortune that few could even comprehend, billions upon billions, but for Magnus, wealth had always been a byproduct, never the primary goal. His true passion lay in innovation, in solving complex problems, in contributing something meaningful, something lasting, to the world. He believed in the power of technology to uplift, to connect, to solve humanity's greatest challenges. Yet, in his twilight years, a creeping disillusionment had begun to settle over him like a suffocating shroud. He found himself increasingly isolated in his own golden cage, a prisoner of his own success. The very empire he had forged, the family he had hoped would carry on his legacy, seemed to have been corrupted by the very wealth it possessed. His once vibrant home, a sprawling mansion nestled amidst manicured gardens, felt like a hollow edifice, filled with echoes of superficiality and the relentless, insatiable pursuit of more. He had envisioned a dynasty of innovators, of thoughtful leaders, but instead, he saw a gathering of vultures, circling, waiting for him to fall. His nephew, Caleb, was a prime example, a living embodiment of everything Magnus had come to despise. Caleb had been groomed from a young age to take over Thorne Industries, a decision Magnus now bitterly regretted with every fiber of his being. Caleb possessed a certain sharp intelligence, undoubtedly, a quick wit that could charm if he so chose, but it was overshadowed by an insatiable arrogance and an almost grotesque entitlement. He saw the company not as a force for innovation, a vehicle for positive change, but as a personal piggy bank, a limitless means to fuel his extravagant lifestyle and inflate his already bloated ego. Magnus had watched, helpless and horrified, as Caleb systematically dismantled the very values Magnus had instilled in the company, replacing them with a cold, profit-driven mentality that disregarded ethical considerations, environmental impact, and human welfare. Caleb's conversations were always peppered with boasts of his latest luxury acquisition, a new custom-built superyacht, a state-of-the-art private jet, a sprawling estate in the south of France, punctuated by sneering remarks about the less fortunate, whom he viewed as nothing more than burdens on society, or worse, invisible nuisances to be swept away. Their existence seemed to offend his polished sensibility. The final straw had come during a particularly contentious family dinner, an annual affair Magnus had once cherished as a rare opportunity for genuine connection, but now dreaded as a painful reminder of what his family had become. The long mahogany dining table, laden with crystal and silver, stretched out, reflecting the candlelight. Caleb, oblivious to his uncle's quiet presence at the head of the table, had been loudly recounting an incident where he'd witnessed a street vendor struggling to set up his stall in the pouring rain, his goods getting soaked. Honestly, Caleb had scoffed, swirling expensive Bordeaux wine in his glass, its crimson liquid a stark contrast to the coldness in his eyes, the sheer audacity of some people. blocking the pavement, making a mess, creating an eyesore. They should just clear them all out. Out of sight, out of mind, I say. They contribute nothing but squalor, a blight on our beautiful city. Other family members, equally detached and insulated by their impenetrable bubble of wealth, had murmured their agreement, some even chuckling, finding humor in the plight of another human being. A profound chill, a deep, unsettling coldness, had seeped into Magnus' bones as he looked at their faces, at their empty eyes, their self-satisfied smiles. It wasn't just Caleb, it was the insidious rot that had spread through the entire family, a moral decay that wealth had amplified, not tempered. It was a cancer on his legacy. He realized then, with a jolt of painful clarity, that he had failed. He had built an empire, a monumental testament to his vision and effort, but he had failed to instill humanity, compassion, or a sense of responsibility in those who were meant to inherit it. He could not, would not, hand over his life's work, his meticulously built legacy, to individuals so utterly devoid of compassion, to those who saw the world only through the narrow, distorting lens of personal gain. He needed to be sure. He needed to see if there was any genuine kindness left, any flicker of empathy in a world that seemed increasingly dark, consumed by self-interest. The idea, radical and audacious in its simplicity, began to form in his mind, growing from a seed of desperation into a fully formed, daring plan. He would step outside his gilded cage, shed his identity, and immerse himself in the very world his family so casually dismissed. He would become one of them, a discarded soul, a forgotten face, and observe. He would test not just his family, but humanity itself, specifically around the opulent enclaves where the elite thrived. He would shave his signature, distinguished beard, a symbol of his public persona, instantly recognizable to millions, allowing only stubble to grow, altering his familiar contours. He would exchange his bespoke suits for worn, dirty clothes he'd meticulously acquired from charity bins and forgotten corners of his vast estate, choosing garments that spoke of hardship and neglect. He would adopt the persona of a frail, elderly homeless man, burdened by age and the crushing weight of hardship. He would wander the streets, particularly around the high-end establishments his family frequented, observing their interactions, their true characters, unmasked by the pretense of politeness or the expectation of inheritance. His mission was simple yet profound, to find one genuine act of selfless kindness, a single beacon of light in the overwhelming darkness, before making the most crucial decisions about his vast fortune and the future leadership of Thorn Industries. The stakes were nothing less than the soul of his legacy, the very heart of his life's work. Magnus Thorn, now known to the world only as Old Man Henry, a name he had picked at random from a faded newspaper clipping, finding a grim amusement in its utter anonymity, had been on the streets for weeks. The initial shock of the cold, unforgiving pavement beneath his makeshift bed, the constant gnawing hunger pangs that felt like a physical entity within him, the pervasive stench of urban grime, a cacophony of exhaust fumes and stale garbage, had slowly given way to a sharpened awareness, a heightened, almost predatory sense of observation. He was invisible, a ghost in plain sight, a forgotten shadow on the periphery of a bustling city, and in that invisibility, he saw the true, unvarnished faces of humanity, stripped of their social masks. He saw casual cruelty, averted gazes, and profound indifference, but also, occasionally, fleeting moments of quiet kindness among those who had nothing themselves. He learned the rhythm of the streets, the unspoken codes, the subtle shifts in whether that meant survival or suffering. His body ached constantly, his joints stiff, his stomach protesting its emptiness, but his mind, sharper than ever, absorbed every detail. His first encounters with Caleb in his disguised state were particularly illuminating, and soul-crushing in their predictability. One crisp autumn afternoon, the air biting with the promise of winter, Magnus, shivering slightly despite the layers of threadbare clothing he wore, found himself perched on a dilapidated bench across from the Gilded Spoon, a Michelin-starred restaurant where Caleb frequently entertained clients, flaunting his wealth and influence. He watched as Caleb, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that shimmered subtly in the weak sunlight, radiated an aura of self-importance as he exited the restaurant, his laughter booming, echoing off the polished stone facade, as he bid farewell to a group of equally affluent associates. As Caleb reached his gleaming, custom-built luxury sedan, a disheveled man, clearly homeless and desperate, timidly approached him, hand outstretched, muttering a plea for spare change, his voice barely audible above the city din. Caleb didn't even break stride. His eyes, fixed on some distant, more important thought, perhaps his next deal or his next vacation, simply flicked towards the man, a flicker of profound disgust, almost revulsion, crossing his features. Without a word, he ostentatiously pulled out a pristine white handkerchief from his breast pocket, unfolded it with deliberate slowness, wiped his hand vigorously, as if he'd been contaminated by the mere proximity of poverty, and tossed the used cloth onto the pavement before slipping into the plush interior of his car. The car door slammed with a definitive thud, cutting off the homeless man's plea, leaving him standing there, hands still outstretched, humiliation burning in his eyes. Magnus watched it all, his own heart aching with a mixture of shame, a deep, personal shame for the man his nephew had become, and a grim confirmation of his worst fears. Caleb saw people like that not as fellow human beings, but as filth, as an inconvenient stain on his polished, carefully curated world. Days later, the cold still a constant companion, Magnus found himself near Café Lumière, a trendy, upscale coffee shop known for its artisanal brews and its bustling outdoor seating that spilled onto the busy sidewalk. He had chosen this spot deliberately. Caleb often held informal meetings here, enjoying the spectacle of the city while conducting business, his voice often carrying, oblivious to the world around him. Magnus, hunched over, his face artfully smudged with dirt, his sparse, matted hair clinging to his scalp, looked every inch the forgotten old man. He had not eaten a proper meal in days, and a gnawing emptiness in his stomach, a hollow ache, gnawed at his resolve, threatening to break his carefully maintained composure. He watched as Caleb, seated at a prime outdoor table, gestured grandly with his hands, a diamond-encrusted watch flashing on his wrist, as he regaled his companion with tales of his latest corporate coup, his voice unnecessarily loud, carrying easily over the ambient city noise. And then, I told them, look, it's purely a numbers game. Sentimentality has no place in modern business. If it doesn't turn a profit, it's dead weight. Simple as that. He punctuated his words with a harsh, mirthless laugh, completely unaware of the weary eyes of the old man on the curb, or the young waitress who was diligently clearing tables nearby, her movements efficient and practiced. This young waitress was Elara. Elara was 24, her slender frame often betraying a weariness that went beyond her years. She worked 2 jobs, Café Lumière in the mornings and a late-night diner shift across town, just to make ends meet, to keep her head above water. Her mother had fallen ill a year ago, a debilitating chronic illness, accumulating medical bills that had swallowed their meager savings like a hungry beast. Her dream of attending art school, of studying sculpture and bringing her vivid imagination to life, had been meticulously put on hold, traded for the grim reality of endless shifts and aching feet. Despite the crushing weight of her responsibilities, the constant fatigue, Elara possessed an unyielding wellspring of empathy, a deep reservoir of kindness. She saw the world not through rose-tinted glasses, but through a lens of quiet understanding, of shared struggle. She noticed the elderly woman who always ordered just a small tea and lingered for hours, clearly lonely, and would bring her an extra cookie. She remembered the specific coffee preferences of her regulars, often adding a little extra foam for a child, or a warm, encouraging smile for a harried parent. She knew the cafe's strict policy: no loitering. No beggars. Maintain the establishment's image at all costs. She had seen managers, even Caleb himself on occasion, coldly dismiss individuals who dared to approach the cafe looking for charity, their faces hardening, their voices sharp. Yet, Elara's heart ached for those very people. She knew what it was like to feel overlooked, to struggle in silence, to face insurmountable odds. As Magnus continued to observe, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over him, a dark cloud obscuring his vision. His throat felt like sandpaper, parched and raw, each swallow a painful scrape. The sun, though not oppressive, seemed to beat down with an unexpected intensity, draining the last vestiges of his strength. He realized with a jolt that he hadn't had a proper drink of water in almost a day. His carefully constructed act of frailty was now becoming a genuine physical reality, his disguise blurring with his true distress. His vision swam for a moment, the bustling street a kaleidoscope of indistinct shapes, and he instinctively reached out, leaning against the cold, unyielding wall of the cafe building, seeking support. He wasn't begging for food, just a simple glass of water, a basic human need, a desperate plea from his own body. His eyes, clouded with genuine distress, scanned the outdoor seating area, hoping for a kind face, a moment of recognition, a flicker of humanity. His gaze landed on Caleb. The nephew was still engrossed in his conversation, now discussing his upcoming vacation to a private island in the Caribbean, his voice laced with casual extravagance. Magnus, his steps slow and faltering, began to shuffle towards the cafe's outdoor perimeter, his hand half raised in a weak, almost imperceptible gesture, a last, desperate attempt at connection. Caleb, in mid-sentence, caught a glimpse of the old man's approaching figure from the corner of his eye. A look of annoyance, almost revulsion, flashed across his face, a familiar disdain. He didn't even pause his conversation, didn't miss a beat. He merely raised his hand, a sharp, dismissive wave, as if swatting away an annoying fly, a bothersome insect. His eyes narrowed, and he subtly shifted his chair, turning his back slightly, effectively cutting off any potential interaction, building an invisible wall. Some people, Caleb muttered, low enough for his companion to hear, a sneer twisting his lips, just have no sense of decorum. No respect. Inside the cafe, Alara was collecting empty coffee cups from a nearby table, her movements efficient and quiet. Her eyes, always observant, always scanning her surroundings, caught sight of the old man. She saw the genuine tremor in his hands, the pallor of his skin, the desperate, pleading look in his eyes that spoke of genuine suffering, not just a demand for handouts. It wasn't the aggressive, demanding posture of some beggars she'd seen. This man looked truly unwell, on the verge of collapse. Her heart clenched within her chest, a familiar ache of sympathy. She knew the rules, the strict policies, the risk of a reprimand, even dismissal from her precarious job. But her conscience screamed louder, an insistent voice that drowned out the fear. The image of Caleb's dismissive gesture, which she had witnessed from the corner of her eye just moments before, only fueled her resolve. It was a stark contrast, the casual cruelty against the silent, desperate suffering. Without a moment's hesitation, but with a practiced, almost furtive grace, Alara walked towards the service station. She grabbed a clean glass and filled it with chilled water from the dispenser, the ice clinking softly. Her movements were quick, deliberate, ensuring no manager or supervisor noticed her deviation from protocol, her act of quiet rebellion. She then walked out to the outdoor seating area, ostensibly to clear another table closer to Magnus. As she passed him, her steps barely making a sound, she subtly lowered the glass, extending it towards him. Her eyes met his, and in her gaze, there was no pity, no judgment, only a profound, compassionate understanding, a recognition of shared humanity. "Here," she whispered, her voice soft, barely audible above the city hum, a gentle balm to his ears. "For you." And then, she offered him something more precious than the water itself, something that transcended material value, a genuine, warm, and empathetic smile. It was a smile that reached her eyes, crinkling the corners, conveying a message of shared humanity, a moment of recognition that transcended their respective stations, his disguise, and the vast gulf of their perceived social standing. Magnus took the glass, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed hers, a brief, electrifying touch of unexpected kindness. The coolness of the water, the pure, unadulterated kindness in her eyes, felt like a balm to his parched soul, a soothing elixir after weeks of bitterness. He drank slowly, savoring each sip, feeling the life flow back into him, not just physically, but spiritually. Alara didn't linger, she simply moved on to the next table, resuming her duties as if nothing extraordinary had happened, as if she had not just performed an act of profound grace. But for Magnus, it was everything. In that single, selfless act, in that quiet defiance of rules and expectations, he had found what he was looking for. This was the genuine article, the kindness that sprung not from obligation or expectation of reward, but from the depths of a truly empathetic heart. He spent the next few days in quiet contemplation, recovering his strength in a small, rented room, the memory of Alara's smile a persistent warmth within him, solidifying his plan. He observed Alara one more time, from a discreet distance, watching her interact with other customers, with her colleagues. He saw her patiently explain a menu item to a confused elderly couple, her hand resting reassuringly on the arm of a young mother struggling with a crying baby, her polite but firm refusal of a manager's request to discourage a group of students from lingering too long by making them uncomfortable. She was a beacon of quiet resilience and unwavering kindness in a world that often seemed intent on crushing both. He also noted the name of the cafe, Alara's approximate shift times, and, most importantly, her name, which he overheard a colleague call out, a soft, lyrical sound. His decision was made, absolute and unchangeable. The test was over. The verdict was in. The grand ballroom of the Thorn corporate headquarters hummed with a nervous, almost frenetic energy. Tonight was the annual Thorn Industries Gala, a lavish affair that doubled as a quasi-board meeting where the year's strategic directions were announced and, more importantly, where the delicate, often cutthroat, dance of power and succession was subtly performed. Caleb Thorn, resplendent in a custom-made tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, moved through the glittering crowd with an air of triumphant confidence, his chest puffed out, a conquering hero. The whispers were everywhere, carried on the soft strains of the string quartet and the clinking of champagne glasses. Caleb's finally taking full control. Magnus is out, clearly too old, too frail for this world. He reveled in the adoration, the sycophantic smiles, the eager handshakes, the murmured congratulations. He had just finished a speech, expertly delivered, though lacking in genuine substance, peppered with buzzwords like innovation and future-proofing, none of which he truly understood beyond their financial implications. He felt on top of the world, invincible, the undisputed king of his domain. Suddenly, an almost unnatural hush fell over the room, as if an invisible hand had pressed a mute button on the entire gathering. All eyes turned, as if pulled by an irresistible magnet, to the grand entrance, where a sleek, black limousine, one of the most expensive models on the market, a discreet fortress of luxury, had pulled up to the red carpet. A uniformed chauffeur, impeccably presented, stepped out, opened the rear door with a deferential flourish, and extended a gloved hand. From within emerged not a celebrity, not a politician, not even a titan of a rival industry, but a man who caused a collective gasp to ripple through the assembled elite, a sound like a single, indrawn breath. He was impeccably dressed in a dark, perfectly tailored suit, the fabric a rich, deep charcoal that absorbed the light. A silk pocket square, a splash of vibrant azure, provided a subtle burst of color against the crisp white shirt. His hair, once matted and unkempt, was now neatly coiffed, silver at the temples, gleaming under the ballroom lights, lending him an air of distinguished authority. And his face, clean-shaven, revealing the sharp, intelligent features that had graced the covers of business magazines for decades, etched with wisdom and a newfound resolve. His gaze, though still holding the profound wisdom of his recent ordeal, now blazed with an undeniable, formidable power, utterly in control. It was Magnus Thorn. Not the frail, wandering old man of rumor and grainy photographs, but the titan of industry, the reclusive founder, the very essence of Thorn Industries, resurrected and redefined. He looked years younger, revitalized, imbued with a quiet ferocity. A collective murmur swelled, growing from whispers to an audible din, a chaotic mixture of shock, confusion, and raw, undeniable fear. Caleb, who had been mid-conversation, recounting his latest shrewd business move, felt his blood run cold. His jaw slackened, and the confident smirk vanished from his face, replaced by a mask of utter disbelief, a blank slate of horror. This couldn't be. The old man was supposed to be gone, senile, out of the picture, a forgotten relic. Magnus walked slowly, deliberately, into the ballroom, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his family, his associates, the very people who had gossiped about his decline, who had silently, or not so silently, celebrated his supposed demise, eager for their slice of his empire. He paused, allowing the weight of his presence to settle, his eyes settling on Caleb. The younger man visibly flinched under the intensity of his uncle's stare, as if struck by an invisible blow. "Good evening, everyone," Magnus' voice, now amplified by the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system, resonated with a power that commanded immediate, absolute silence. "I trust you are all enjoying the festivities." He paused again, a master of timing, allowing the full weight of his unexpected presence to settle upon them. "I believe there has been some misunderstanding regarding my recent whereabouts, and indeed, my current state of mind." A faint, almost imperceptible smirk, born of bitter amusement, touched his lips. "Some of you, I understand, have been rather vocal about my supposed decline. Others, perhaps, have been a little too eager to carve up my legacy, to divide the spoils." He walked directly towards Caleb, who stood frozen, rooted to the spot, his eyes wide with a dawning horror, a terrible realization slowly creeping into his consciousness. "Caleb," Magnus stated, his voice devoid of warmth, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, "you have been acting CEO for some time now. You have been entrusted with the reins of Thorn Industries, a company built on integrity, innovation, and a profound respect for every individual, regardless of their station in life, regardless of their wealth or lack thereof." Magnus stepped closer, invading Caleb's personal space, his voice dropping to a low, chilling tone that only Caleb could truly hear, yet the microphone picked up every damning word, broadcasting it to the stunned crowd. "You, my dear nephew, have managed to forget every single one of those principles. You have flaunted your inherited wealth, you have dismissed the struggling, the desperate, and you have, most unforgivably, treated basic human empathy as a weakness, a sentimental burden." Caleb stammered, his voice cracking, betraying his carefully constructed composure. "Uncle. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I've worked tirelessly for this company. My life has been dedicated to Thorn Industries." His words sounded hollow, even to himself. Magnus raised a hand, a gesture of absolute finality, cutting him off. "Oh, I think you understand perfectly. You see, while you were busy planning your next lavish purchase, while you were so arrogantly dismissing those you deemed beneath you, those you chose to ignore, I was watching. I was there." He paused, allowing the full, crushing weight of his next words to sink into Caleb's rapidly dissolving world. "I was the old man begging for scraps, the nuisance you waved away, the inconvenient truth you chose to ignore." A collective gasp swept through the room, louder this time, filled with a mixture of shock, scandal, and a terrifying revelation. Faces paled, some turning green. Whispers erupted, escalating into a chaotic roar, a torrent of shocked murmurs. People pointed, their eyes darting frantically between the immaculately dressed Magnus and the stunned, now trembling Caleb. The full, terrifying realization of Magnus' social experiment, of his profound, merciless test, crashed down upon them like a tidal wave, drowning their carefully constructed illusions. Caleb looked as though he had seen a ghost, his face contorted in a mixture of fear, disbelief, and utter, soul-crushing humiliation. His carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of inherited wealth and casual cruelty, was crumbling around him, and the architect of its destruction was the very man he had so carelessly dismissed, so cavalierly disrespected. "The game, Caleb," Magnus declared, his voice cutting through the din, sharp and clear, reverberating through the ballroom, "is indeed over. And I assure you, the consequences have only just begun." The aftermath of Magnus Thorne's dramatic reveal was nothing short of a cataclysm for Caleb Thorne and his opportunistic relatives. The meticulously planned gala, meant to be Caleb's coronation, his crowning moment of triumph, had transformed, within minutes, into his public execution, his downfall laid bare for all to witness. The very next morning, the corporate world buzzed with the news, unable to contain the sensational story. Media outlets scrambled, desperate to confirm the astonishing, unbelievable tale of the billionaire who had walked among the homeless, who had shed his identity to test the very core of humanity. The narrative, sensational and damning, painted Caleb as the arrogant, heartless villain, a direct, horrifying contrast to the wise, discerning patriarch who had engineered this grand, theatrical unveiling. Caleb's immediate reaction was a furious cocktail of denial and incandescent rage, a desperate flailing against the inevitable. He cornered Magnus in his private office, which had once been his, flanked by a phalanx of bewildered, nervous lawyers, their faces a mixture of confusion and professional alarm. "This is insane, uncle!" Caleb shrieked, his face contorted into a mask of pure fury. "A theatrical stunt. A grotesque charade. You can't just do this. It's slander. It's defamation. I'll sue. I'll expose you for the madman you are to the whole world." His voice cracked with desperation, a pathetic echo in the vast office. Magnus merely sat behind his desk, a quiet, immovable force, calm and unyielding. "Madman," he mused, a cynical, knowing glint in his eye, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Perhaps. But a madman who saw through your charade, Caleb. Do you remember that crisp autumn afternoon at the Gilded Spoon? The man you wiped your hand after, as if touching him would contaminate your pristine existence? That was me. Do you recall the old man at Café Lumière, parched and unwell, whom you dismissed with a flick of your wrist, a gesture of ultimate contempt? That was also me." He paused, allowing the full, crushing weight of his words to completely obliterate Caleb's bluster, leaving him deflated and exposed. "Your contempt for humanity, Caleb, your utter disregard for the suffering of others, was not a secret to me. It was, in fact, the very thing I sought to expose, the cancer I sought to excise. The consequences were swift and merciless, delivered with the cold precision of a surgeon." Within hours, the Thorne Industries board, still reeling from the shock of the public spectacle and desperate to salvage the company's rapidly tarnishing image, unanimously voted to remove Caleb Thorne as acting CEO. Magnus, exercising his founder's rights and his majority shareholding, personally oversaw the transition, appointing a long-trusted, ethical executive, Anya Sharma, a woman whose values consistently aligned with Magnus' original vision for the company. But Caleb's downfall was far from over. Magnus' legal team, armed with irrefutable evidence meticulously gathered during the social experiment and years of discreet, thorough investigations into Caleb's financial dealings, revealed a pattern of gross mismanagement, questionable investments that prioritized personal gain over company stability, and even outright fraudulent activities that skirted the edge of legality. The disinheritance was absolute, total. Not only was Caleb stripped of his position, but his trust funds were frozen, his corporate accounts audited with ruthless efficiency, and every asset linked to his frivolous spending seized to compensate for his indiscretions. His luxury penthouse, his fleet of exotic cars, his private jet, all gone, vanished like smoke. He was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mountain of crippling legal woes. His former associates, who had once flocked around him like vultures around carrion, now vanished, fearing association with the disgraced heir, their loyalty as thin as air. Caleb, utterly broken, his carefully constructed world shattered, found himself on the very streets he had once so disdainfully dismissed, a poetic justice that Magnus found grimly satisfying, yet tinged with a profound sadness for what might have been. The rest of the family, those who had enabled Caleb or silently approved of his actions, who had chosen to turn a blind eye to his arrogance, also faced Magnus' swift and unyielding wrath. Their allowances were cut, their company positions terminated, and their expectations of inheritance shattered into a million pieces. They watched in horror as their gilded lives, once a given, crumbled, replaced by the stark reality of financial independence, a concept utterly foreign and terrifying to them. They learned, belatedly and painfully, that true wealth was not something to be taken for granted, but a responsibility. While Caleb's world imploded, Ilara's life was about to be transformed in a way she could never have imagined, a truly fantastical shift in fortune. A week after the gala, a formal letter, crisp and official, arrived at Café Lumière, bearing the prestigious Thorn Industries letterhead. It requested Ilara's presence at a private meeting at the towering Thorn headquarters. Her heart hammered with a mixture of dread and profound confusion. She was certain it was about the water, that a manager had finally seen her act of kindness as a violation of policy, a breach of corporate rules. She rehearsed her apologies, her explanations, fearing she was about to lose the only stable job she had, the one that kept her family afloat. She arrived at the Thorn building, intimidated by its towering grandeur, its polished marble and gleaming chrome. She was ushered into a luxurious waiting room, then into a spacious, elegant office that radiated quiet power. And there, behind a large mahogany desk, sat Magnus Thorn. Not the frail old man she remembered, but the powerful titan, impeccably dressed, his eyes still holding that profound depth and knowing wisdom. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. "Mr. Thorn," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, a thread of sound. I'm Ilara. I was told to come here. I'm so sorry if I caused any trouble at the cafe. I know I broke policy by," she began to explain, her voice trembling. Magnus raised a hand, a gentle smile gracing his lips, halting her apology. "No apologies, Ilara. Quite the contrary. Please, sit." He gestured to the comfortable leather chair opposite him. Once she was seated, still bewildered, still expecting a reprimand, he leaned forward. "Do you remember an old man, weeks ago, at Café Lumière? Parched, dizzy, desperate for a glass of water?" Ilara's eyes widened in dawning realization. She remembered the man, his genuine distress, her instinct to help, the quiet defiance of her own conscience. "Yes, sir. I do." "That man, Ilara," Magnus said, his gaze unwavering, his voice soft but clear, "was me." Ilara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes welling up with tears of shock and disbelief, a wave of emotion washing over her. You were." She couldn't finish the sentence. The old man, the beggar, the forgotten soul, was the legendary Magnus Thorn. It was unfathomable, a twist of fate beyond her wildest imaginings. Magnus nodded, a gentle smile. "Indeed. And you, Ilara, were the only one who saw me, truly saw my distress, and acted with genuine, selfless compassion. Caleb, my nephew, dismissed me with a wave of his hand. Others averted their gaze, pretending I didn't exist. But you, knowing full well you were risking your job, quietly brought me a glass of water. And you offered me something even more valuable, a warm, compassionate smile that spoke volumes." He paused, his voice softening further. "That act of kindness, Ilara, was the beacon I had been searching for. It solidified my decision about who truly deserves my trust, and my legacy." He then presented her with a set of documents, official-looking, bound in leather. "Ilara, I have established a trust in your name. It contains a significant sum of money, enough to ensure your mother's medical bills are fully covered, and to secure her future well-being, to alleviate her suffering. Furthermore, it will allow you to pursue your dreams. I've heard you have a passion for art, for sculpture. This trust will provide for your full tuition at the finest art school of your choice, anywhere in the world, and a generous living stipend so you can focus solely on your studies without the crushing burden of working 2 jobs." Ilara was speechless, completely overwhelmed. Tears streamed down her face, tears of overwhelming relief, profound gratitude, and disbelief. She tried to speak, to form words of thanks, but only choked sobs emerged. It was a fairy tale, a dream beyond her wildest imagination, plucked from the pages of a fantastical book. Her mother's health, her art school dreams, her future, all of it, suddenly within reach, a gift from an unexpected angel. "And Ilara," Magnus continued, his eyes twinkling with genuine warmth. "Should you choose to, after your education, there will always be a place for your compassionate spirit here, within the Thorn Philanthropic Division. We need more people like you, with hearts of gold, to guide our future endeavors, to ensure our wealth serves a greater purpose." Elara finally found her voice, though it was still shaky, barely a whisper. "Mr. Thorn. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me." Magnus smiled, a genuine, profound smile that reached his eyes, filling them with a quiet joy. "No, Elara. Thank you. You reminded me that even in the darkest corners, kindness still shines brightest." Months turned into a year, then 2. The dust had settled, and the landscape of Thorn Industries, and indeed, the lives of those involved, had been irrevocably reshaped, transformed by a single, daring act of observation and consequence. Magnus Thorn had formally retired, stepping down from the day-to-day operations of Thorn Industries completely. He had appointed Anya Sharma, the ethical executive he had chosen, as the new CEO. Anya, a brilliant and compassionate leader, swiftly began to steer the company back towards Magnus' original vision, emphasizing ethical innovation, corporate social responsibility, and a renewed focus on human welfare. Magnus, freed from the burdens of corporate governance, dedicated his remaining years to philanthropy, personally overseeing a new foundation established to support homelessness initiatives, provide vocational training, and promote widespread acts of kindness through grants and community programs. He found a profound peace in this new chapter, a deep, abiding contentment, knowing that his legacy would be built not on greed and ambition, but on genuine human connection and compassion. The weight of disillusionment had lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose and the serene satisfaction of having done right by his principles. He would often visit the new charitable shelters, not as a disguised beggar, but as a benefactor, sharing quiet words of encouragement, always remembering the feeling of cold pavement beneath his own worn shoes, the sting of hunger, the sting of indifference. Caleb Thorne's fall from grace was complete and absolute, a spectacular descent. Stripped of his wealth, his reputation in tatters, he found himself utterly adrift, cast out into the very world he had disdained. His lavish lifestyle had been replaced by the grim reality of poverty, the struggle for basic necessities. He attempted various desperate ventures, but without his uncle's money or influence, and with his moral compass irreparably broken, every attempt failed, collapsing under its own weight of incompetence and lack of true effort. He was a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that entitlement, when unchecked by empathy or responsibility, leads inevitably to ruin. He was forced to confront the very struggles he had once mocked, to feel the gnawing hunger, the biting cold, the indifference of strangers, now understanding, perhaps for the first time, the sheer desperation of those he had once so casually dismissed. The irony was a bitter pill for him to swallow, a constant, agonizing reminder of his own callousness, his own wasted opportunities. Elara, however, blossomed, her spirit unfurling like a flower in the sun. The financial security provided by Magnus allowed her mother to receive the best medical care, leading to a significant improvement in her health, a miracle Elara never thought possible. Elara enrolled in a prestigious art school, her talent, once stifled by circumstance, now free to flourish, to express itself without constraint. She excelled in her studies, her art infused with the empathy, resilience, and profound understanding of humanity she had cultivated through her own struggles. She continued to practice small acts of kindness daily, understanding their profound, ripple effect. She never forgot the old man who was truly a titan, and the life-changing gift he had bestowed upon her. She eventually opened a small, community-focused art studio, offering free classes to underprivileged children, a quiet testament to the enduring power of compassion, a way to pay forward the kindness she had received. She had not only received a fortune but had also gained a profound understanding of life's true values, of the invisible threads that connect all people. The story of Magnus Thorn, the billionaire beggar, became an urban legend, a whispered tale in boardrooms and on street corners alike, a modern fable. It served as a stark, unforgettable lesson, that true character is not revealed in the glare of success, in the comfort of wealth, but in the quiet, often unseen, moments of adversity. It is in the shadows, when comfort and pretense are stripped away, that one's true nature is laid bare, for better or worse. And in a world often consumed by the relentless pursuit of material gain, it is the simple, selfless act of kindness, extended without expectation of reward, that shines brightest, illuminating the path forward. For every act of genuine compassion, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem at the time, resonates through the universe and, in ways one can never anticipate, always finds its way back to the heart that offered it, often multiplied beyond measure. If you were captivated by Magnus Thorne's extraordinary journey and Alara's heartwarming kindness, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. We have many more powerful stories of unexpected twists, moral lessons, and life-changing moments waiting for you. What did you think of Magnus' daring test? Do you believe Caleb deserved his harsh fate, or was it too severe? And what about Alara? Do you think her kindness was truly the key to her incredible reward? Share your thoughts and tell us about a small act of kindness you've witnessed that made a huge difference in the comments below. We love hearing from you.